Ethan Harper stared at the text on his phone for the 5th time, feeling a mix of curiosity and apprehension tighten in his chest. You should come this weekend. Just us. It's been too long. Lucas Reynolds had sent it casually, almost teasingly, yet something in the words made Ethan hesitate. Visiting his stepbrother's house had always carried a strange weight, half familial, half unexplored tension. He knew it was ordinary on the surface, a weekend visit, shared meals, the occasional teasing banter, but beneath that, a quiet storm of emotions always lingered. He glanced at the reflection in the window, watching himself frown. His hair fell slightly over his eyes, his lips pressing together in indecision. Ethan had never been good at ignoring the feelings Lucas stirred in him. Something about the way Lucas carried himself, the ease in his voice, the slight curve of his smile, the way he seemed to understand him without explanation, made Ethan simultaneously excited and nervous. He rationalized it all. Of course, he's just my stepbrother. It's nothing complicated. Yet the truth, stubborn as it was, simmered under the surface, teasing him every time Lucas was near. By Friday evening, Ethan had packed lightly, bringing just what he needed for 2 nights. The drive to Lucas' house was quiet, the hum of tires against asphalt was the only sound that punctuated his thoughts. Memories of previous visits floated through his mind, evenings spent laughing at nothing, Lucas teasing him relentlessly, quiet moments where they had caught each other's gaze just a second too long. Ethan's pulse quickened, and he chastised himself. He had to keep things normal, he told himself. It's just a visit. Lucas' house came into view, framed by the golden light of sunset. It was a modern structure, sleek lines softened by the careful placement of plants and the warm glow spilling from the windows. Ethan's stomach twisted, a combination of anticipation and unease. He parked his car in the driveway and lingered for a moment, taking in the scene. Lucas was on the porch, leaning casually against the railing, holding a glass of something amber-hued. He looked up, spotted Ethan, and grinned, the kind of grin that made Ethan's chest tighten in ways he hadn't expected. Finally, Lucas called, voice smooth and playful. I was beginning to think you'd chicken out. Ethan forced a smile, stepping out of the car. You know I wouldn't do that, he said, but even as he spoke, he felt the old familiar tug at his restraint, the pull of something unspoken that always hovered when Lucas was near. Inside, the house was warm, smells of roasted vegetables and fresh bread weaving through the air. Sophie Harper, Ethan's stepmother, appeared from the kitchen with a welcoming smile. Ethan, dear. So glad you're here. Lucas has been talking about this all week, she said. Her presence was comforting, maternal in a way that reminded Ethan of home. Yet it also highlighted the tension simmering between him and Lucas, a contrast he couldn't ignore. Lucas clapped him on the shoulder, guiding him toward the living room. Don't mind her fussing. She's harmless, he said with a teasing wink. The casual intimacy of the gesture, the ease with which he invaded Ethan's personal space, made Ethan's heart skip a beat. He shook his head, trying to brush it off, but Lucas caught the movement, a knowing smirk tugging at his lips. The evening passed in a blur of easy conversation, light teasing, and small moments that carried weight Ethan couldn't articulate. A brush of hands over a shared tablet, a glance that lingered too long during a card game, laughter shared a little too closely. These were ordinary things, yet Ethan felt them as sparks igniting beneath the surface. Every interaction was layered, and every smile or look from Lucas seemed charged with something he shouldn't feel for a stepbrother. Later, as they settled into the living room, Lucas stretched out on the couch, feet inches from Ethan, who sat rigidly in the armchair. Remember that time you thought you could beat me at chess? Lucas asked, voice low, teasing. Ethan's ears warmed. You let me win, he countered lightly, trying to keep the conversation playful. Did I? Lucas' eyes held his, a teasing challenge in their depths. Or did I let you feel like you could? I always knew you were smarter than you wanted to admit. The subtle compliment sent a shiver down Ethan's spine. He tried to shift, finding an excuse in the form of sipping water, but Lucas' gaze followed him, patient and unyielding, as if reading the unspoken lines etched into Ethan's nervous posture. By the time night fell, Ethan found himself wandering the hallways, acclimating to the unfamiliarity of being in Lucas' space for an extended period. Each room seemed to hum with memory, the sound of laughter bouncing off walls, the faint scent of Lucas' cologne lingering from previous visits, reminders of the subtle, unspoken tension that existed between them. He paused by the staircase, reflecting on the emotions that had been quietly building over years. It was confusing, overwhelming, yet undeniably compelling. When he finally returned to the living room, Lucas was leaning against the back of the couch, watching him. "Long day thinking, or just pacing?" Lucas asked casually, though his tone carried something deeper, intimate even. Ethan swallowed, unsure how to respond, caught off guard by the weight behind the words. He gave a small shrug. "Just adjusting, I guess." Lucas nodded, not pressing further, yet the way he sat there, relaxed and observing, made Ethan hyper-aware of every movement, every heartbeat. Something was shifting, a subtle change in their dynamic that Ethan couldn't ignore. He knew, deep down, that this weekend would not be like any other. The air between them was thick with anticipation, unspoken possibilities, and the strange thrill of forbidden familiarity. As Ethan prepared to go upstairs to his room for the night, he paused at the top of the stairs, glancing down at Lucas in the dim glow of the living room lamps. Lucas caught his gaze and offered a small, enigmatic smile. Ethan felt a flutter in his chest, a mixture of dread and excitement. This weekend, it's going to change everything, he thought. And for the first time, he didn't resist the notion. The quiet of the house settled around him, but the tension lingered like a pulse. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, only that nothing would feel the same again.
The morning light slipped through the blinds, casting pale stripes across the apartment walls. Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his body still beside Michael's but his mind far away. The kiss from the night before replayed endlessly, each memory sharp with both exhilaration and shame. He hadn't slept, turning over again and again the same question: what did it mean, and what would he do now? Michael stirred next to him, stretching before pressing a soft kiss against Ethan's shoulder. "You were quiet last night," he murmured. "Everything okay?" Ethan forced a nod. "Just tired. Long day." It was a lie, and he knew it. Michael accepted the explanation without hesitation, as he always did, his trust unwavering. That trust felt heavier than any accusation could. Later that morning, while Michael busied himself with errands, Ethan sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand. A new message glowed on the screen. "Last night wasn't a mistake. Don't pretend it didn't mean something." The words from Daniel sent a shiver through him. His thumb hovered over the keyboard, torn between deleting the message and answering it. In the end, he did neither. He simply locked the phone and shoved it face down on the table, as though hiding it could erase the truth it carried. Days passed, but the distance between Ethan and Michael grew impossible to ignore. Michael asked questions, small ones at first. "Are you stressed at work? Did something happen with your family?" Ethan brushed them aside, always with the same refrain: "I'm fine, just tired." But Michael's eyes lingered on him longer now, suspicion flickering at the edges of his usual warmth. Daniel, meanwhile, refused to fade into silence. Another message came. Then another. Sometimes playful, sometimes pointed, but always reminding Ethan of the current running between them. Each vibration of his phone was a reminder of the boundary he had already crossed and the pull of what might follow. Eventually, Ethan agreed to meet him again. He told himself it was just a talk, to clear the air, but deep down he knew he was lying. The second meeting came easily, too easily. Daniel's presence was intoxicating, his laughter sparking the same restless energy Ethan had been craving. One meeting became two, and then more, each time leaving Ethan with a heavier conscience and a sharper ache of guilt. At home, Michael's gestures of care began to cut in unexpected ways. The way he made Ethan tea without asking. The way he reached for his hand while watching television. The way he leaned his head on Ethan's shoulder, trusting, unguarded. Every act of kindness was a mirror reflecting Ethan's betrayal, forcing him to confront the widening rift between who he wanted to be and who he was becoming. One evening, Michael cooked Ethan's favorite meal. The effort was obvious, candles lit, the table carefully set, soft music playing in the background. Ethan sat across from him, heart heavy, the meal tasting of ash despite the care put into it. "Are you happy?" Michael asked suddenly, his voice quiet but steady. The question struck harder than any accusation. Ethan opened his mouth, but the words tangled in his throat. He wanted to say yes, to reassure Michael, to hold on to the stability they had built. But another part of him, restless and guilty, whispered no. He forced a smile, swallowing the truth. "Of course I am." Michael studied him for a moment, then nodded, choosing, at least for now, to believe the answer. That night, while Michael drifted into sleep beside him, Ethan sat at the edge of the bed, phone in hand again. A new message from Daniel glowed on the screen. "You can't keep pretending. You know where you belong." Ethan didn't reply. He didn't delete it either. He simply stared, torn between the life he had built with Michael and the fire Daniel represented. The screen dimmed, plunging the room into darkness, but the weight of the choice remained. Ethan lay back down, his arm draped around Michael as though nothing had changed. Yet inside, he knew everything had. He closed his eyes, caught in the silence of the night, aware that his double life was unsustainable. But for now, he remained in the in-between, neither confessing nor committing, trapped in a quiet betrayal that grew heavier with every passing day. And as the city outside settled into sleep, Ethan realized he wasn't sure how long he could keep carrying the secret, or how long it would be before it. The next morning, the sun broke through the thin curtains, scattering light across the wooden floorboards. I woke up to the sound of laughter outside. Ryan and Noah were already up, joking as they packed snacks for the hike. For a moment, I thought about pretending to be asleep, but curiosity won. I joined them, still half dreaming of the night before, the firelight, Liam's quiet question, and the look in his eyes that refused to fade. Liam stood by the porch railing, sipping coffee. He looked peaceful, like someone who'd made peace with the world, or was trying to. When he noticed me, he smiled softly. "Sleep well?" "Not really," I admitted. "Too much thinking?" "Yeah," he said, glancing toward the forest. "Me too." The group decided to hike the ridge behind the cabin. The trail wound through tall pines and damp earth. Ryan led the way, pointing out landmarks from a map he barely glanced at. Emily followed close behind, occasionally snapping pictures for social media. Noah filled the silence with jokes. I stayed near the back, where Liam walked beside me. He didn't talk much, but when he did, it wasn't small talk. He asked about my art, about what I wanted to do with my life. I told him I painted when I could but hadn't shown my work to anyone, not even Ryan. "You should," Liam said, his voice low but sure. "People deserve to see how you see the world." The sincerity in his tone caught me off guard. When we reached the top, the view stretched endlessly, layers of green mountains rolling beneath a pale blue sky. Everyone took turns taking photos, laughing and teasing. Yet I noticed something in Ryan, an edge I hadn't seen before. He was unusually protective around Emily, especially when Liam got too close to the group. It was subtle, but there, a shadow beneath his charm. That evening, the weather turned colder. The group decided to stay indoors, huddling around the fireplace. Ryan and Emily bickered quietly about something. She wanted to leave early, he wanted to stay another night. The tension was obvious. Eventually, Ryan stormed outside to get some air. Emily disappeared into their room, leaving the rest of us in awkward silence. Noah mumbled something about needing a walk and followed Ryan, and just like that, it was only me and Liam again. The fire burned low, painting the room in flickering gold. For a long time, neither of us spoke. I stared into the flames, trying to read them, trying not to think about the way my heart sped up in his presence. Then Liam said quietly, "You ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" I turned toward him. "What do you mean?" He exhaled slowly. "Like, you're doing what everyone expects, but none of it feels like you." His words sank deep. "Yeah. I feel that all the time. He nodded, his gaze fixed on the fire. I've spent so long pretending. Smiling when I didn't want to, saying things I didn't mean. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to just stop pretending. The room felt smaller suddenly, the air heavier. I could feel his words pulling something loose inside me, something I'd locked away for years. What would you do, I asked softly, if you didn't have to pretend? He looked at me then. Really looked. His expression was steady but vulnerable. Maybe I'd start by telling the truth. That sometimes, the people who make us feel most alive are the ones we're not supposed to feel anything for. My breath caught. The fire cracked sharply, the sound echoing in the silence that followed. I didn't know what to say. My thoughts blurred, guilt, confusion, and an undeniable pull toward him. He leaned back, running a hand through his hair. I shouldn't have said that. I shook my head. No. It's okay. But it wasn't okay. It was dangerous, because I felt it too. The night drew on, stretching longer than it should have. Eventually, he stood and walked toward the door. I need some air, he murmured. I followed him without thinking. Outside, the forest was quiet, the air cold and sharp. The moonlight spilled across the clearing. We stood there for a long time, just breathing. Then, in the stillness, he said, "Ethan, there's something about you. Something that makes me feel seen." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My heart was pounding too fast. When I finally looked up, his expression was full of hesitation and something else, honesty, but before I could find the courage to respond, a voice cut through the night. "Liam?" "Ethan?" It was Ryan. He stood near the cabin steps, eyes flicking between us. Confusion twisted into suspicion. He didn't say anything more, but the silence said enough. Liam stepped back immediately, his jaw tightening. I froze, guilt flooding through me even though nothing had happened, nothing, except everything unspoken. Ryan's gaze lingered, cold and sharp, before he turned away and slammed the door behind him. The moment shattered like glass. The fire inside me dimmed, replaced by the heavy weight of realization. Something had been crossed, not in action, but in meaning. And I knew, as I stood there under the moonlight, that nothing between us, or between me and my brother, would ever be the same again.
Ethan Harper woke to a soft gray light filtering through his blinds, the lingering scent of rain still clinging to the air. His thoughts immediately went to Lucas Reynolds, and the memories of the past 2 days pressed against his mind like an unrelenting tide. The tension, the subtle intimacy, the quiet gestures, everything had been leading towards something he wasn't entirely prepared to face. As he sat up in bed, the quiet of the house felt heavier, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Downstairs, the soft clatter of dishes and the hum of the morning routine continued, normal and unsuspecting. Sophie Harper moved about the kitchen, cheerful and oblivious, her presence a reminder of the ordinary life that still existed beyond the charged air between Ethan and Lucas. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, feeling a flicker of guilt. He knew the weekend had shifted something fundamental between them, and he wasn't sure if he could reconcile it with the boundaries he had always tried to maintain. Lucas was in the living room when Ethan arrived, perched casually on the edge of the couch with a mug of coffee in hand. He looked up, offering a small smile that was both familiar and enigmatic. "Morning," Lucas said softly. There was a deliberate calm in his tone, a quiet assurance that made Ethan's chest tighten. It was the same magnetic pull that had been present since the first moment he entered this house, an invisible thread drawing him closer, whether he wanted it or not. "Morning," Ethan replied, his voice slightly uncertain. He found himself scanning Lucas' expression for clues, trying to read the intent behind the casual warmth. There was a subtle weight in Lucas' gaze, as if he knew more than he should, as if he could sense Ethan's every hesitation and anticipation. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, aware of how easily he had been drawn into this dynamic, how little resistance he now felt toward it. They spent the morning in quiet proximity, talking in soft tones about trivial things, music, recent events, small observations. Yet every word seemed layered, every glance carrying an undercurrent of tension. Ethan noticed the way Lucas would occasionally lean closer, his shoulder brushing subtly against Ethan's, or the way his fingers would linger just a fraction too long on a book he passed over. It was an intimacy measured carefully, teasingly, enough to unsettle Ethan without ever crossing a line he could articulate. By mid-afternoon, the sun broke through the clouds, scattering light across the polished floors of the house. Lucas suggested they step out into the backyard, where a quiet patio overlooked a small garden. Ethan followed, aware that even the most mundane spaces now carried a new weight. The air between them was charged, silent in the way that only moments of anticipation can be, each gesture and glance magnified by the unspoken connection. As they settled on the patio, Lucas spoke first, voice low, reflective. "Do you ever think about how easily life changes in a single moment?" Ethan hesitated, caught off guard by the question. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but I try not to dwell on it too much." Lucas smiled faintly, the curve of his lips gentle yet knowing. "Some moments, you don't get to ignore them. They have a way of staying with you, no matter how much you resist." Ethan felt the truth in those words reverberate through him. He knew exactly what Lucas meant, even though neither of them had said it directly. The past weekend had been filled with moments that challenged everything he thought he knew about himself, about boundaries, and about the intensity of the connection he shared with Lucas. His pulse quickened, a mixture of fear, exhilaration, and longing coiling tightly in his chest. Lucas leaned back slightly, resting an arm on the railing, and studied Ethan with a quiet intensity. "You're thinking too much," he said softly, almost a whisper, though the calm in his voice carried more weight than a shout. Ethan looked away, feeling the warmth rise to his cheeks. He wanted to deny it, to pretend nothing had shifted, yet he couldn't. Every look, every touch, every word from Lucas had left a mark, subtle but permanent, on the fabric of his emotions. For a long moment, they simply sat in silence, the world around them fading into a soft blur. Ethan's mind wandered through the past 2 days, recalling each carefully measured gesture, each fleeting smile, and each charged glance. He realized, with an uneasy clarity, that this connection, whatever it was, had changed him. He felt exposed, vulnerable, yet inexplicably alive in a way he hadn't anticipated. As evening approached, they returned inside, the dimming light casting long shadows across the floors. Sophie remained unaware, moving about the house in quiet comfort, leaving the stepsons to navigate the delicate tension between them. Ethan lingered at the top of the stairs, glancing down at Lucas, who looked back with the same subtle, knowing expression that had haunted him since the beginning of the weekend. There was a quiet understanding now, a recognition that something fundamental had shifted and that neither of them could go back to the way things had been. That night, Ethan lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, memories of the weekend playing over and over in his mind. The interactions, the subtle touches, the quiet confessions, they had all left an indelible mark. He knew now that his feelings for Lucas were more than curiosity or fleeting attraction, they were a deep, undeniable pull that challenged every boundary he had tried to maintain. The weekend had been transformative, reshaping the way he saw himself, Lucas, and the unspoken connection they shared. In the quiet of his room, Ethan understood the weight of what had transpired. The intensity of their interactions had opened something within him, a part of himself he hadn't allowed to surface before. There was excitement, yes, but also fear of what this meant for their relationship, for family, for the fragile balance between desire and morality. Yet beneath the fear, there was a thrill, a recognition that some things couldn't be undone, and perhaps shouldn't be. As he finally drifted toward sleep, one thought lingered, heavy and persistent: the weekend had changed everything. The quiet tension, the forbidden closeness, the unspoken promises, they had all woven a new reality, one that would shape the days to come. And though Ethan didn't know exactly what lay ahead, he felt certain of one thing: he would never be the same again.